Hey everyone, this is Curb Knight, and it is finally time to revisit Magnolia. Alright, so with the introduction of a few cards from Festival Booster 2024, I think that Magnolia is finally ready to get back in the game. I think it is in a decent place in the meta. Specifically, it does an excellent job at countering probably the best deck in the format currently. But aside from that, it is still a very solid deck. I think that this does require a bit of a higher skill ceiling because this is a very toolboxy deck. There's a lot of like loops to consider. There's a lot of lines of play to think about. You have to consider how you're spending your resources each turn, and you do have to like consider how you're going to play into the long game, whether you're going to rush early or you're going to drag it out until they run out of resources. So this deck is somewhat difficult to play. I will put that right now. And unfortunately, I do also say that if you want to take Mag to a competitive event, my recommendation is just don't, because of the new time rules. Magnolia is not a deck that can finish things up in a timely manner unless you like hit crit, which, you know, that could be said for any deck. But Magnolia does kind of excel right now in the long game, in the sense where it literally can stall out almost every other deck in the format right now, assuming that you're playing your cards right. But let's get into it. Let's forget all the ramblings of my meta talk and let's just talk about the deck. Alright, so getting into the ride line, of course we are just playing Lotte because he's a Sylvan Beast. Doesn't actually matter for anything. But of course for the rest of the ride line, I'm opting to play, of course, the rest of the new Magnolia ride line that we got all the way back in set 1. I said as if that was that long ago. But anyways, since these are new cards, let's go ahead and go over them. So the new Karis, when he's ridden over by literally anything that has Sylvan Beast, so if you wanted to actually like change this out with something else, you could totally do that. And I'll tell you what you might want to change it out for, maybe. But basically, when he's rode upon by a grade 2, you look at the top 3, choose a grade 2 or less from among them, call it to rear, and then you can either discard the rest or put them on the bottom of the deck. So if you usually get like 3 normal units, you call one, maybe you want to mill the rest depending on what it is. But you can also just, if you see a bunch of triggers, you can just call the one that's not a trigger and then put everything else to the bottom of the deck, just to make sure that it does stay in that deck. So we do have Lattice, who is, you know, our grade 2. So he is a 15k attacker all on his own, while you do have a Magnolia Vanguard, but that's only if you get him on rear, which sometimes he does actually hit the rear guard circle, so he becomes a 20k attacker, which is technically better than a couple of other you know, attackers that you have in the deck. But his main skill is when he is ridden over by Magnolia, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 3 or grade card from your drop or a normal order and add it to your hand. So ideally what we're doing is we want to discard a specific card to ride up to Magnolia and then Soul Blast 1 and get that card back. So we do have a pretty advantageous, this is a +1, this pretty much just makes it so that you don't neg from riding up, assuming you see the right cards. And then of course we do have base Magnolia, same as it always has been since trial deck number 4. So at the end of battle attack, counter +1, choose one of your guards. It can attack from the back row and it gets 5k. If you Persona Ride, you can choose 3 instead of 1, but of course we don't actually play any Persona Rides, so we're only in it for that one skill. So getting into the main deck, of course, no Magnolia deck is complete without the 4 copies of Elder. I'm still need to get my last SP copy, so apologies for that. But of course, Elder, the same as it's always been. When it's placed on Vanguard, you choose a card from your soul, you may call it to rear guard. Sometimes you don't do that, but there are some it's a very niche situation in which you wouldn't do that. But you do actually have to know when you're not supposed to call. So you do, because you don't always call off of this. But anyways, the main skill is that if you have 1 or more cards in your soul or on your rear guard with Magnolia's card names, all your rear guards can attack and intercept from the back row, and they also get 5k. So this is going to allow you to unleash 6 attacks every single turn, assuming you have your board set up and you actually want to. I will say, if you're playing this deck correctly, you do need to know your matchups, and you need to know when it is time to attack with 6 attacks, when it's time to be conservative and protect your board, or when it is time to go all out and ham and just beat their face and finish the game. So that is one of the necessary skills to actually play this deck. Alright, so moving on to the grade 3s, we are of course only playing one grade 3 in this deck, and of course it is the best grade 3. This is the Stride Fodder Dragon First Loikea. So, when it's placed on rear or Guardian Circle, if you have a grade 4 either in hand or on van, you can, when it's placed on rear, Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 2 or greater card with a different card name than him, so you can't add himself back, but you can add other stuff that can get him back, which we'll talk about later. And then aside from that, he does also get 15k shield, and then he also has the other skill that when he's discarded to ride to a grade 3, you can draw a card. So the main combo of play is you want to have this guy in your opening hand. What you want to do is you want to get your Lattice out, and then you're going to go ahead and discard this. You're going to ride into Magnolia. This skill is going to proc. You're going to draw a card, and then you're going to use Lattice's skill to Soul Blast 1 and then add him back to your hand, because he is both a 15k shield, which is very good, and he is also basically able to help you tutor anything out of your drop zone. So he is insanely good in that sense. One card that I have cut since the last time is Inlet Pulse Dragon, because Inlet Pulse Dragon is a bad card. I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe I'll make another video on why Inlet Pulse is now a bad card. But for now, we realistically only need this. And of course, one way we do have also to fetch him out is the Forbidal. So of course, Forbidal, this has been out for a while. It's just search your deck or drop for a grade 3 and a grade 4 with different card names. Call the grade 3s, add the grade 4s. So basically, you know, your 5th copy of Magnolia Elder. It does also get this. And do remember, if this gets hit into damage zone and then you heal it out, you can call this, you can Soul Blast 1, and then you can add this back to your hand because it is a grade 2 or greater card. You can play it, add an Elder, call another copy. Very golden. So that's just one of the many plays that you can actually play with this deck. You can also discard Forbidal to ride to 3 and then just add it back. So like I said, there's a lot of toolboxing and a lot of just like small niche plays that you do have to know and be able to recognize when you're playing this deck. All right, getting into our main bulk of the deck, of course, that being the grade 2s. And of course, we are going to be starting off with the 4 copies of Goyle-Dote. So Goyle-Dote is a pretty important piece in this deck, I would say, because in drop, when your Vanguard with Magnolia and its card name is placed during the ride phase, your soul does not have a Goyle-Dote. You can put him into soul, choose one of your Vanguards, it gets 5k until the end of turn. And then, of course, from the back row, when he attacks, he gets an extra 10k. And then at the end of that battle, if it is in the center column, you can actually retire him and draw a card. So, Goyle-Dote is, theoretically, I will say you could play him at 3. But the reason I am playing him at 4 is because he is super vital. You need to get 2 copies of him into the drop zone, preferably at least by turn 4. Just because Goyle-Dote, once you have 2 of them, it basically supplies you with infinite soul. Because you ride the Elder, and what actually happens, the ruling on this is, if you have 2 Goyle-Dotes in the drop zone, when you place your Vanguard during the ride phase, they both see that. But you put the first one in and give the 5k. This one now loses its target. But during the ride phase, if you're able to Soul Blast something out, like say the ride phase skill of Lattice, you still get that skill. And then this one was in the drop zone when your Vanguard was placed, and you now no longer have a Goyle-Dote in your soul, so this one can activate. And you put it into the soul, and you get another 5k to your Vanguard, and essentially this is how you get infinite soul. The one thing that you do have to remember with this is you need to make sure you get your Goyle-Dote out of the soul every single turn, otherwise you can't loop it like that. So basically, what Goyle-Dote does, it says as long as you keep riding, you have infinite soul. Because you ride Elder, you go Goat 1, Elder skill, call out Goat, Goat 2. You just got 1 free soul for riding up. Or I guess 2, because you know the thing underneath it gives you another soul. But essentially, this card is super vital because we do have a lot of things that are soul blasting, and you know, you can't Soul Blast out your Magnolia, otherwise you do actually have to, you know, fucking call a Magnolia so you can actually get Magnolia's skill online. But I think that Goyle-Dote F4 is just so that you see it, because it is that important. That's why we're playing at 4. And it is also a 25k attacker, which, you know, don't sneeze on that. And it does also have to just like attack pretty much every single turn, because that lets you draw another card. That plus triple drive is like 4 cards during the battle phase, which is like insanely good. And I guess one thing to note, he doesn't actually have to attack the Vanguard in order to get the power, which is something that not all the cards in this deck can say. Okay, of course, moving on from that long explanation, we do have the 4 copies of Banana Spotty. So this is, of course, our Reborner. So when he's placed on rear, other than during the battle phase, so as long as it's not battle phase, whether it's ride phase, main phase, or end phase, you can Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your Vanguards with Sylvan Horn Beast in its card name, and for every 2 grades of that unit, choose a grade 2 or less card. Oh, is that grade 3? No, it's grade 3 or less card with a different card name than this unit. Call it from your drop. So basically what this means is, as long as you're playing Lattice, you can call this during your turn 2, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, Reborn something. And then, of course, aside from that, when he attacks, choose one of your Vanguards with Sylvan Horn's Beast in its card name. And for every 2 of that grades, it gets 5k. So essentially what happens is, this is a 15k attacker whenever. This is always a 15k attacker, but once you get to Elder, it becomes a 20k attacker. Plus the 5k from Elder makes it a 25k attacker. And it is also a +2 to board, because you call it Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, call 2 things. And then say you call, I don't know, this card, Soul Blast 1 more, add another card. Basically what this card does is, either one of these kind of enables you to get a full board, because you just, depending on which one you have, you call this, Soul Blast 1, add this from drop, call this, get 2 more. And then if you have a Goyodo and you road, you get another one. So essentially these 2 cards enable you to recover from emptying your board. They enable you to recover from being board wiped. And they're just like the best things. He also does have extra utility, which we'll talk about later. But he is just an overall solid card, and he is, I believe, the only thing that really uses Counterblast in this deck outside of Magnolia itself, the grade 3, not the grade 4. So you can easily spam his skill, especially with the next card we'll talk about. Alright, so of course, moving on from Banana Spotty, we do have a little bit of an older card. I think this came out of the same set as Goldo, actually, or like around that time. But we do have 3 copies of Alpin. Alpin is just the, when he attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Vanguard with Magnolia in its card name, gets 5k for at the end of the till the end of that battle for each of your 2 grade 2 or greater units, and then if it gets 10k or greater by its ability at the end of that battle, you can bind it, countercharge 1, and soul charge 1. So Alpin, I'm playing him at 3 currently. You could easily tone him down to 2 if you wanted to make space for some extra text, but Alpin is in this deck because he is, unfortunately, your best attacker. Once you have a full board of grade 2 or graders, he does reach 30k with Magnolia's skill, because he gets an extra 15k from his skill, and then an extra 5k from Magnolia, so that's the highest that you can get. But he does also serve extra utility, because he is a rear guard that gets himself off board, which is important for something that we'll talk about next. But he does also give you, he technically gives you counter charge, so you can just instantly, you can spam this over and over again. But honestly, like the main reason I like him is because it gives you soul, which is the one resource that this deck does kind of lack. Goyodo does mitigate it to an extent, but just having that extra soul off the soul charge does come in handy a lot, especially since, like I said, that combo that costs 2 soul, so even if you get 1 free soul, you do have to go minus 1 soul. So just having an extra soul charge in the deck makes things that much better. But he is also just a really strong attacker. You always love to see him whenever you can, whenever you really want to push board or, you know, just control the board. But he does have to attack a Vanguard, so remember that. Alright, and speaking of clearing our board, the reason why we like to clear our board with this and this is because we are playing 2 copies of MPEG. So this is a bit of an older card, one of the first promos for Stoicheia. So in the back row, he gets an extra 10k. Then if you have 3 or less rear guards, all your rear guards in the same column as him cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. So this is strictly here for the Shiranui matchup, because if you throw down an MPEX and you play your cards right, you absolutely shit on Shiranui. Because MPEX basically shuts down Shiranui, so they become a 3 attack deck. They counterblast 1, get 5k. Because what you're supposed to do with this is, it does diminish the number of your attacks, but from all the games I played against Shiranui, you can easily grind out Shiranui. Like, it is no problem. Like, they're attacking you 3 times. 3 times. Because what you do is, essentially you do have to make an ideal board, where you have something like this. Of course, your Vanguard in the middle, like that. So you have a board that's set up like this. You do kind of have to leave this column, but what you can do is, if you have an Alpin, you can call the Alpin to that column. You can swing Alpin, bind it, swing Goyodo, kill it, and now you have 3 or less rearguards, and they're all in one column, so Shiranui can't dominate anything. And now you might be thinking, oh, but what about the start of ride phase skill? What if they force me to call something? Okay, they say call the Goldo. All right, I'll call the Goldo. You still can't dominate, because remember, you do actually get to choose where you call the rearguard. They don't get to choose that, you choose that. So you just call it over, whatever's in the Impex column. Yeah, sure, you lose out on that, but they still can't dominate you, and that means that they only do 3 attacks. So, this is just like an insane Shiranui counter. I'm sorry, DF, but you are wrong. This is actually the deck that best beats Shiranui. Oh, and I guess one final note about Shiranui. Know your rulings. They actually can't Mukro you either, because in order for Mukro to attack with a Vanguard, they do have to dominate a rearguard. And, you know, you can't dominate a rearguard, so that means you're not dominating the Vanguard. Just remember that. Alright, with the Shiranui hate out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some new cards. So, one of the best new cards, I guess I can talk about them together, this order package. Because this is a new order package from Festival Booster, and of course this is the defensive one because it is Soike. So when this card is placed on rear, doesn't have to matter where it is, it can be placed from deck, from hand, from drop, wherever. You Soul Blast 1, search your deck for a Flowering Sweet Shop, you put it into the order zone, and then you shuffle your deck. And then if he is placed onto Guardian from the rearguard circle by the ability of that order card, he gets 5k shield. So it's a 10k shield. And then of course the set order, the Flowering Sweet Shop, is the defense set order. So when your unit is attacked, you choose one of your rearguards that's not being attacked, you move to the Guardian circle, and then it also gets a skill when it's retired from Guardian, it gets bound instead of retiring, which is absolutely insane for the deck. So first, let's talk about why this is good. So obviously, the thing that every deck can do with this is you can intercept with PGs. The DPGs only need to be put on Guardian Circle. They don't need to be like placed. So that means you can PG from your board, which is the one out to Luard. Because if you remember, I did say that Mag's worst matchup is Luard because it just instantly dies to Drag Strider, because you can't use Elementaria because, you know, you're on grade 4. But this makes it so that you don't die to Drag Strider. They go Drag Strider, you say, okay, intercept with PG. They go Black Demire, you go, okay, intercept with PG. You just, like, fixes all of your bad matchups, so that you can do things. Also, remember, this enables you to call your Stridefire Dragons, because you call your Stridefire Dragon, you add something back. That is a super great skill, but the problem with doing that is you lose out on 15k shield. But this card says, okay, I called this, I got value, I swung, they're attacking me, I need a 15k shield, okay, intercept for 15k shield. What can I say? This card just pulls super hard duty in this deck and is absolutely a really big saving grace for this deck. So, moving on to ratios. I'm playing 3-1. I have considered maybe playing 2-2 or even 3-2, just because being able to intercept twice per turn means that you can intercept with PG and intercept with the 15k shield. But in my limited testing for now, it hasn't really come up that much. There is the other thing, like, oh, what if you damage this? Well, what if you damage it? What you can actually do is you can heal this out. And remember, grade 2 or greater card. So if this card ends up in the drop zone by whatever means, remember, he can only search from deck. So what you can do is, if you really need it, call, Soul Blast 1, add, play. Okay, now I have a 15k intercept. It's just that easy, which is why I think that this ratio is fine. I was playing him at 2 initially, as you might have seen in the fight video, but I think him at 3 is much better. It feels much better, because you do kind of want to see him. You don't want to see him in every matchup, because like things that like control your board, it's a little bit harder to use this. But for the most part, in every other game, he is really, really good. And then our last grade 2 slot is really somewhat more of a cheeky tech. You don't really have to play this. I'm playing 1 copy of Nectar of Sensationalism. This is kind of just my finisher. You don't really want to see it like outside of the late game. But the reason why I'm playing like Nectar, I also considered playing that one, the golden Magnolia one, to give something 5k to just like make something swole, because technically that is a little bit more usable like earlier in the game, and this is like reserved for the late game. But the reason why I chose Nectar over that card is because, wouldn't you know it, grade 2 or greater. So what you do is your end game basically involves you calling this over and over again, adding the nectar, playing the nectar, and then swing with it like every single turn. But most games don't usually last that long. Sometimes you don't even see this, but that's why this is in there. You can totally cut this, but it is very funny, and it is technically like part of the toolbox, so you can access it like whenever you want. Hey everyone, I know the video is already pretty long, but I did want to just insert a quick little aside just to talk about why I'm not playing specifically these two cards, because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people in the comments asking, why aren't you playing this? Why aren't you playing this? These cards are good. And the reason is, let's do them one at a time. So Friendship Fairy is your ride skipper. The main problem with Friendship Fairy is it's only useful going second. Because in order to actually use Friendship Fairy and ride into Magnolia on turn 3, your opponent does have to be a grade 3, so that means that you do have to be going second, or the other situation which this is useful is if you don't have Elder and you have this card plus Forbid All. So I just felt it wasn't really worth the deck slot, because outside of being able to accelerate you by 1 turn if you go second, it is just a 15k attacker that doesn't do anything. Like, it gives you 1 soul, which I guess is a plus, but you can't get Goyodotes in off of this because Goyodote only works on the ride phase. And I just always felt that this card doesn't really have a place. It's just not good enough. It's honestly just like the effect is too old for the current format. So that's why we're not playing Friendship Fairy. But as opposed to the Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, I was playing this for a long time. I still think this card is very solid, but the main reason that I did cut it, the main reason it was in the deck in the first place is because Magnolia doesn't use any energy inherently. We still don't have any Energy Blast cards, so this is a way to actually use your energy, but there's quite a few reasons why I cut him. So first of all, you already have a lot of cards that you want to discard for ride deck. You've got your Goyodotes, you have the grade 3, so I found myself not really wanting to discard him, and when I did discard him, it didn't feel good because I still had to get the other cards in my hand into the drop zone somehow, and I needed to do that on turn 2 or turn 1. And he just kind of kept taking that place. Yeah, he kept drawing me a card, and he is still a solid and very good card, especially since you can use the Counterblast because your deck doesn't use Counterblast that much, or energy, so like literally he fits in very good. But the problem I kept having with him is kind of the same thing with Friendship Fairy. On board, he doesn't do anything. He's a 15k attacker. That's so weak. That's so pathetic. Even if you intercept with him, he doesn't get his skill because you have to place it from hand. And although he is like a bit of a cycle, I just always found myself wanting a piece rather than him, because every other card in the deck pulls its own weight. This card is only in the deck to get you to other cards, which arguably Habitat also kind of does, but Habitat at least checks his top 7 and calls something. This doesn't really do anything. It has another skill that you're never going to be able to use because you can't Persona Ride in the deck. So although I still think this is a solid card, if you want to play him, go ahead and try it out. But him not being a combo piece, and just like the fact that he's literally just there as defensive value, he doesn't contribute anything else besides that, I just had to cut him, and the deck does feel a lot better after he got cut. Alright, so moving on to the grade 1s. We do actually play a few grade 1s. I will say that these grade 1 slots are very changeable. You don't really need to play them. First off, we're actually playing 1 copy of Sleeve Tugging Bell. This is mostly for memes, but it is still a solid card. So when it's placed on rear, you put all the cards in your bind zone into drop, and then it gets 5k for each card put until the end of turn. So what this does is essentially, remember that the set order does force you to bind every card that goes to the Guardian Circle. So this card, your PGs, they all get bound. And then what you can do is, once you put them back into the drop zone, you can just call a Banana Spari, and, you know, call them back, which is something I forgot to mention when we talked about set order. Remember that he can call back anything. He calls back your PGs, he calls back your 15k shields, and you could even call OT if you really wanted. But yeah, so he enables that so good. Like, that's another reason why the set order packages are just so good. And then this is just there to reset everything. And theoretically, what it can also do, remember that Alvin binds itself, so you can reset your Alvins and then, you know, just reborn them back if you need them, because they are strong attackers and they are really good. So you don't actually need to play this. It doesn't really do a whole lot, especially like just for my testing. It does become kind of swole, assuming you can get like 5 or so cards. But aside from that, you know, you don't need to play this. It's just there for the lulz. There's like plenty of things you can play instead of this. And then of course my other one, I still do have one more flex slot even after everything else. So I decided to put in a cat. You know, cat is your just, you know, put your 2 cards from Ride deck. It's a 20k shield, or you can soul charge 2 and give something 5k. Like I said, you do technically have some soul issues, so you could theoretically use that. And technically speaking, I was gonna say you could, yeah, you can technically use its skill twice and then move it to the guardian circle and guard for 20k shield. You just need to make sure that you have another you have another elder to rewrite the next turn, because you're going to be getting rid of your Magnolia, and then you are still going to need a Magnolia in this one. So if you just rewrite an elder, then it's all fine to do that. And then of course our last one of is actually a copy of Nature. I almost said Naturia Habitat, Mythiarch Habitat. But this card is mostly in there. You know, check top 7, call something. If this is calls from deck, which I guess off Karis' skill, you can just add it to your hand. So it's decent in that sense. But the main reason I'm playing this is because you notice I'm playing a lot of like 3 ofs, 2 ofs, 1 of. This is just there to be like extra copies of those cards. And also, there are a lot of cards that are super vital to your strategy. Like, you do sometimes want to get the Banana Sparty in rotation. You also want to get this in rotation. You need the goats in rotation. Maybe you want to get this to set up your order package. There's so many just like good call targets off of Habitat. It essentially serves as the 3rd, the 4th, the 2nd, or the 5th copy of a lot of your cards. And it just does not really conflict because you already have a massive amount of shield value. Okay, and then I'm just finishing off the grade 1s. Of course, we are actually going to be playing 4 PGs. One of the main reason I actually wanted to wait till Festival Booster to play this deck was because of New Elementaria, because New Elementaria was supposed to be my way to counter my Luard matchup. But, you know what's better than playing a 1 of Elementaria? Playing 4 PGs that you can just intercept with. I did test out with the Elementaria, and who would have known? Blitz orders are bad and objectively worse than PGs in almost every single way. Especially when you have a card that does exactly what Elementaria does. Elementaria is just there to get around Garter Trick, right? Well, I already got around Garter Trick, so I don't need it. If you're confused as to why I'm so angry at Blitz orders, I made a whole video on it. Go check it out. And this is yet another point that proves everything that I said in that video. Blitz orders are still just objectively worse than PGs. Alright, so getting into the trigger lineup. Some of this might be a little sus, but you know, you can change the trigger lineup. It doesn't have to be what I have. So we do have the 4 crit. I am playing Alana's because, like I said, we do technically have soul issues, so sometimes you want to put it in, especially with like the prison matchup. You just imprison one of these when they force you to imprison from drop, and then you can boost with it and put it into soul. You're losing out on attack there, but it is what it is. And then, of course, I am playing 3 more crits, so a total of 7. And then the rest of my lineup is very sus because I'm playing 2 front triggers and 2 draw triggers. For whatever reason, this ratio just seems to like work because fronts are really good because they're 20k shield. Also, they give you like more power to your board than like any of these triggers. These only give you like 10k to the board. This gives you 30k. So just like hitting this feels really good. 20k shield feels really good. But at the same time, you do sometimes want some draw. So just having the extra draw triggers there does feel pretty nice. Just being able to draw into those pieces. Maybe you're missing the Elder because we do only play essentially 5 copies of it. So sometimes you do need to get to it. And then of course we are playing the 4 heals. Currently I'm doing 4 vanilla, 2 counter crit. This is just a holdover from Luard. You don't have to play counter crit. You don't have to play counter attack. It's whatever. It's up to preference. I'm just leaving it in because Zorga and Blag are very prominent at my locals, so I feel like they're fine just being left in there. You could also go 4 draw or 3 draw. You go 4 front, 3 front. I would recommend playing some number of draws just because it does come up a little bit to draw into your pieces. So I think it's fine like that. But other than that, like everything you can change in the deck. So, and then of course we are still playing Blessed Favor. Blessed Favor is just like one of the best OTs. It's just, you know, super versatile. It's helpful in almost every situation. Even if it's just a critical trigger, you know, it's still just a critical trigger. But yeah. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish off the video with just a quick test hand. So what we're looking for in our opening hand is we need to see Elder, we need to see Goildote, and then we need to see Stride Fodder Dragon in that order of importance. So we do see a PG, we don't really need it right now. It could be useful later. We saw the Goat, we saw the Inglarver, so we're going to put these cards back. Theoretically, you could keep a PG, because just having one in circulation means that you can just reborn it and then intercept with it. We're going to see a Habitat, we're going to see a Heal, and the Elder. So our opening hand is essentially pretty much perfect. So now with this deck, you do actually want to be going first a lot of the time, just because if you didn't notice, I'm not actually playing Friendship Fairy in this deck, because I think Friendship Fairy is just like a pretty bad card, because for a lot of reasons, like you could put in the Ride deck, but then you're losing out on Lattice. You could put in the main deck, but now you're losing out on some slots. But overall, Friendship Fairy is just not a good card, since like half the time, if you go first, Friendship Fairy doesn't do anything. It is good in that one niche situations where you find Friendship Fairy plus Forbid All, and no Elder, but I feel like that situation is too niche to actually justify playing it. So honestly, just try and go first, unless you're against the Stride deck set. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn. We are going to discard the Goildote because he needs to be in the drop zone. Ideally, we want to see another Goildote, but you know, we can get there when we get there. Another good thing about this deck is you can actually guard early, because this deck doesn't really need much CB. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn. This time we'll go ahead and discard the draw, just right up into the Lattice. Karis is going to let us check top 3, and so we've got 3 pretty good targets here. What I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to call the Banana Sparty, and then we're actually going to mill these other 2 cards, because that puts a Goildote in the drop zone. It also puts an Alpine in circulation, because we can just get it back from the drop. And now we do have a 15k attacker. And then, of course, the other thing we do, I think I'm going to play Habitat. What I'm looking for is the Sweet Flower Man, to set up my set order, and that also is going to give us a 3rd attack. So, ooh, unfortunately, we are going to be whiffing pretty hard here, but worry not. There is a solution. It's called Call a PG, and then hopefully if we can get to our set order package, we can always intercept with it. So it's not the end of the world. Yeah, so even if you whiff like that, it is perfectly fine to like call a PG. It's not as bad as it, you know, used to be back with old Magnolia ride line. But we're going to go ahead and swing. This is going to be swinging for just 10. We're going to drive check, get another PG, something we do not need right now. And then we're going to swing for 21. Now we do actually need some damage, so hopefully they don't damage Anais. But they probably won't, because, you know, they're kind of losing out on tempo at this point. We're going to go ahead and stand and draw. This is going to be into our grade 3 turn. We see another Goildote, but what we actually want to do is we want to discard the Inglarver to ride into the Magnolia. Now we have 3 skills that are on, or 4 skills that are on standby. We have Lattice, we have Inglarver, and we have the 2 goats that we discarded to the drop zone. So all 4 of these skills are going to be activating during the ride phase. So what you want to do is order it properly. You want to use this skill first, so he goes to the drop zone, and then you draw a card, and then you want to use the Goildote skill. It goes to Soul. Then you want to use Lattice's skill, Soul Blast out the goat, add this back to your hand, and then you want to use the second goat. Now this is your super ideal solution, or ideal situation. Normally you might just get, you know, 1 goat, which is perfectly fine, but we're gonna go ahead and add that to our hand with the extra card we drew. Also, we did draw into another goat, which is great. If we didn't, what we could do is call this and you know, just do things. But what we're actually going to do here is we're going to go ahead and play the Forbid All to call out the Inglarver and just go ahead and get us another Elder. We do already have one in our hand. If we didn't have one, then, you know, this would be really, really good, because, you know, that saves us there. And then we're just going to go ahead and use the Inglarver, I think. Just add something back. I think in this situation, we're probably just going to add back the Alpine, because it's going to be a good attacker. We can't really use him this turn because we only have 4 attacks. But we can still Soul Blast 1, reveal this. The main thing is we're getting the second goat out of the soul, so that when we ride Elder next turn, we can actually use it. But we're going to go ahead and add this to our hand. This goes to the drop, and then we did actually draw into another one, so we're just going to call that one there. Ideally, if we didn't actually have this, we would have wanted to add a goat just to call it so that we can have, you know, more draw power. But we're going to go ahead and swing our Vanguard for 23. First check, second check, draw trigger. So there is a little bit of an argument. Like, you can see me, I have way too many goats right now, which is a little bit of a problem, just because, you know, too many goats, they don't do as much. You really only need 2. But, you know, I feel like seeing it, having it and not needing it is better than needing it and not having it. So we're probably going to take like 1 more damage here. Wow, all the PGs are just flying out right now. As we guard, we can go ahead and stand up and go into our main turn. So we're still looking for our set order package so we can intercept with this, but we're going to go ahead and ride onto the Magnolia Elder. At this instant, 2 of our goats will activate. Technically, all 3 of them will activate, but we're not going to be able to do that. One's going to go to Soul, Mag's going to call one out, and the other one's going to go into Soul. And we're going to go ahead and what we can do is just, you know, push a whole bunch here. Probably just leaving the PG. I'm probably going to drive check one in all honesty during this next turn. So I'm going to go ahead and drive, swing, triple drive, first, second, third. I told you I was going to see one off the drive check. Whenever you don't see a card, it always appears on the drive check. Only 5 attacks here because I still want to keep the PG around just in case, especially since next turn I'll be able to, you know, use it. We're going to swing with this, draw a card, and then just, you know, keep swing for, you know, big numbers. Alright, so that is going to do it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do those juicy things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.